I've seen a lot of praise for this movie already, with some people even throwing around the masterpiece word. Well, in the words of Leonidas from 300, I'll put their praise to the test. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it! Do it!
The Creator is directed by Gareth Edwards, who has previously been responsible for such movies as 2010's Monsters, the 2014 Godzilla reboot, and 2016's Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. All films that received a considerable amount of praise upon their release, but that I ended up feeling somewhat indifferent about when I finally got to watch them for myself.
Boo this man!
To be clear, I'm not saying that these movies are bad by any means. They just didn't personally connect with me like they did so many other people. There are things that I liked about them and things that I didn't like. So needless to say, while I was excited to see The Creator, I was also a bit skeptical. The fact that this movie isn't directly associated with any pre-existing property was music to my ears. It's rare that we get mostly original sci-fi epics anymore. So when one comes around, it's always going to pique my interest and be deserving of my attention.
You have my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
So taking all of that into consideration, and now that I've seen the film for myself, what's the verdict? If I'm being honest, in a lot of ways this movie made me feel similar to the way I felt about other Gareth Edwards projects. But there were also a few things in this particular film that made the film stand out amongst his other projects. The Creator drops us into a story as a future war between the human race and artificial intelligence rages on. Ex-Special Forces agent Joshua, played by John David Washington, is recruited to hunt down and kill the Creator, the elusive architect of the advanced AI. However, the Creator has developed a top-secret weapon that has the power to end the war and possibly end all of mankind. So Joshua and his team must venture into enemy-occupied territory to retrieve and destroy this weapon before it can be used against human forces. We all know that AI going rogue and becoming a threat to human existence is nothing new in the sci-fi genre. There have been countless stories already told about this very subject throughout the course of history. But on a positive note, I do feel like the Creator, at the very least, tries to put a fresh spin on the concept. In this story, the conflict between AI and humans isn't as black and white as it's been in the past.
That's racist.
There's nuances to this conflict, with some humans even taking the side of the AI robots. And I think that this initially keeps the viewer guessing, and it makes you question who in fact is the true villain of this story. The issues I have with the story arise when certain revelations are made about the characters. And without getting into spoilers, I found some of these reveals to be quite predictable. Either they very obviously set them up earlier in the film with something the character says, or that some story points just feel so familiar that it was pretty easy to decipher where it was all going.
I see everything.
And that's not to say that the execution of the film was poor. It's more along the lines of how many different ways can you effectively tell a story like this that's been done so many times before. One thing I will definitely give the film credit for is the impeccable timing of its release, because it is very much relevant to current events, if you've been paying attention. With all the paranoia we are currently experiencing over AI technology in our real lives, especially with it being a major talking point and a point of contention in the recent Hollywood strikes,
They took our jobs! Yeah, they're down, took our jobs!
it does make the concept hit a bit harder this time around, especially when you consider that we may be seeing the beginning stages of a very real conflict that mirrors something similar to what we see in the movie in our real world. And this is made even more impactful by the film's very real world setting. This isn't taking place on a far-off planet or a way too distant future. The world of the Creator very much looks like ours, with the exception of the advanced technology. And it just makes the possibility of something like this happening all the more believable.
I don't believe it!
It also makes it aesthetically pleasing, I might add, anytime a storyteller mixes futuristic tech and ideas with a somewhat grounded setting in reality. Make no mistake about it, the visuals are easily this film's biggest positive. A lot of credit should be given to the production design, the character design, the cinematography, and the VFX work that gives this movie a unique look that makes it feel like a living, breathing piece of art. This movie is proof that CGI can still be effective if it's done well and if it's used in the right situation. The film also has a somewhat gritty look to it that kind of offsets the beauty and spectacle of it, and I feel like this has very much become a trademark for director Gareth Edwards at this point.
That makes sense.
Rogue One, for instance, had a very similar visual style, but I do feel like the visuals in The Creator are infinitely more impressive. I also appreciated the respectable amount of world building accomplished in a relatively short amount of time. The film opens with an old-style newsreel that basically lays the groundwork for the conflict we are about to be introduced to. I always felt like newsreels and even opening texts are a lost art in modern sci-fi. They are a simple but effective way of setting the stage for your film. Our main window into this conflict comes in the form of the main character, Joshua, again played by John David Washington.
My man.
And he basically carries this film from a character perspective. None of the secondary characters in this film were all that memorable to me, so a lot is put on his shoulders and I felt like he handled the responsibility pretty well. There's just something very likable about John David Washington, specifically in this film. I think his charisma is on full display, and it really feels like the part was right for him. We see him experience unspeakable tragedy, which understandably turns him into a hardened soul. But when the AI girl is introduced into his life, it starts to change him. And even if the bonding experiences between them do feel a bit rushed, they do have a decent father-child dynamic in the film that is always going to be relatable.
Who is my daddy and what does he do?
Through these characters, we get to see the impact that this war has had on a ground level. It makes everything feel that much more personal. One other thing that I didn't feel like they pulled off to the best of their abilities was the film's flashbacks. On more than one occasion, I wasn't sure if I was watching present-day events or something that happened in the past. I think better transitions between these scenes and some different editing decisions could have gone a long way to fixing that problem.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
And I think this also contributes to the film feeling a bit bogged down somewhere in its second act. And it does feel like it loses a bit of the momentum that it built in the first act by trying to explain everything in the middle of the film with flashbacks. Things do pick back up towards the end of the film, which manages to find a healthy balance between spectacle and crafting an emotionally satisfying finale for the characters. There are moments towards the end of this film where the characters are forced to make these morally difficult decisions, and the filmmakers really make you feel their inner turmoil in those moments.
Why do you cry?
Overall, to me, The Creator very much plays out like a video game plot that borrows elements from different movies from a variety of different genres. You name it, Terminator, Platoon, Blade Runner, District 9, there's a little bit of everything in there. In a lot of ways, it's kind of a love letter to the sci-fi films and war films that clearly inspired it. It even has messages that make the conflict mirror the real-life conflict in Vietnam, and difficult questions being asked about what it means to be human, and even manages to incorporate some religious ideology. The Creator manages to cover all of this ground pretty well, a few hiccups aside. To me, by no means is this a perfect movie, but I do think it serves a purpose, and I do think it's worthy of being seen on the big screen, even if you're going for the visuals alone. I mostly enjoyed The Creator, but certain aspects of it did make me feel a bit underwhelmed. I still think that it's more than deserving of a pleased Palpatine.
Good.
Y'all be cool. Shut up.